We Foster Film is made possible by funding provided by the Dugas Family Foundation, supporting visual arts education in Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Greetings and welcome to We Foster Film, a show where we discuss all facets of filmmaking and television production with the people that make them. I'm your host, Cameron McCasland. Joining me today is my co-host, Nashville recording artist and star of the television series Cooking with Big Fella, NECAP board member, and all-around man about town, Big Fella. How you doing, Big Fella?
Man, I'm doing good, Cam. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm making it. So on tonight's program, we're discussing representation in media for people with disabilities, both in front and behind the camera. Joining us this evening for our panel are four talented people who have made their careers in the film and television industry. Amy Saffell is the executive director of Able Youth, a Nashville nonprofit that helps kids with physical disabilities learn more to be happy, healthy, and independent through adaptive sports. Able Youth also encourages students to explore different careers, leading Amy and her students to become involved here at NECAP. Prior to that, at Able Youth, prior to Able Youth, I should say, she worked at a record label for 12 years. She's a member of the boards of Achilles International Nashville and Fashion is for Everybody, the Nashville Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities, and serves as an advisor for the Spina Bifida Association. She also leads Nashville's adaptive rock climbing group. Thanks for joining us, Amy. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So next up, we've got Teal Sherer, who's best known for creating and starring in the award-winning comedy series My Gimpy Life, which is loosely based on her experiences as a wheelchair user. She's been in national commercials, TV shows like NCIS New Orleans, and most recently, she starred in the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Cost of Living. She's the media columnist for New Mobility magazine and hosts their monthly interview series, New Mobility Live. Welcome, Teal.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Also tonight, we have Alix Oliver, who's a director, screenwriter, producer, and production manager, and founder of Midnight Coffee Productions. As a high school student, he was struck by an SUV, which caused severe neurological damage. Though facing a major physical setback, he persevered to become a graduate of both Kennesaw State University as well as the Georgia Film Academy with a focus on film studies. He's worked on major productions like The Conjuring 3 and stars Black Mafia Family, as well as independent movies like The Last Years of Abel Burnett and Little Marie. Currently, he's in production on a film titled Flashbacks. Welcome, Alix.
Hello.
Thanks for being here, Alix. And finally, we welcome Marti King-Young, who's an award-winning director and screenwriter, a former graduate of the NECAP TV production program. Marti has gone on to work on major Hollywood productions like Kevin Probably Saves the World, Annabelle Comes Home, and National Geographic's Genius Aretha Franklin. Her Nashville-based superhero-themed short film, The Adventures of Wonder Boy, featured a comic book hero with autism and has won rave reviews for its inclusion. Currently, she is the producer's assistant on the Netflix series Sweet Magnolias, and her Western, White Town City, which she wrote and directed, is in post-production. Welcome, Marti.
Hey, thanks for having me. That's exciting. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so we're so happy to have all four of you be part of this panel discussion tonight on inclusion and representation as it pertains to people with disabilities. I feel like there's been a lot of conversation in recent years just about that subject, and we wanted to shine a spotlight on that here at We Foster Film on the subject, and just thought all of you could probably give a little bit of your expertise and further that conversation through your personal experiences. So let's start this way, okay? With asking the question, why do you think it's important for people with disabilities to be represented in entertainment? And Amy, we'll start with you.
Great. Well, so I think it's important for so many reasons. I think it's really important for people with disabilities to see themselves on screen. I think it's really important that people with disabilities like myself really learn how to see themselves, they might not see themselves in everyday life. They might not see themselves in school or in the grocery store. They might not see anybody that looks like them. And so I think a lot of the ways that we build our identity as people in general is through the media. And so when you don't see yourself ever represented in that way, then I think it's really difficult to really figure out who you are and what your potential is. But I also think it's really important for people who don't have disabilities to see people with disabilities as capable individuals. And I think most of us probably that have disabilities can speak to the times where people you talk to people and they seem to not have any idea that people with disabilities live independent lives and can drive and live independently or go to the grocery store, and people will say things like, it's good to see you out. Well, a lot of that would be solved if people without disabilities saw people with disabilities on screen, whether that was in a starring role, whether that was just somebody passing by in a coffee shop or in the mall. And so I think it's really important for people without disabilities to see people with disabilities as capable individuals, and media is one great way to do that, because they also themselves don't necessarily see people with disabilities in everyday life.
Nah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Marti. Marti, first off, Marti, I love you, Marti, because I know you love me.
I love you.
Why do you think it's important to be inclusive on film sets?
Well, I mean, I always shoot for the underdog story anyway, like it's like I came from a really weird background anyway, and it's just ingrained to me to rise above whatever comes your way. And so I think it's us being able to provide the opportunity to be able to have people with disabilities so they can show other people with disabilities it can be done. And I think that's important. I think, and somebody needs to set the tone, and somebody needs to open these doors. And it's not just going to happen because we just want it to happen. Somebody has to go out there and do it. So that was one of the reasons why I did The Adventures of Wonder Boy, because one, it was a good story and fun, but two, because the hero has autism, and that seems to be, and he's accurately represented in this. This is not an actor pretending to have autism. This is not an actor pretending to be in a wheelchair. This is someone who is disabled, who is out there, every day. This is him. And this was his dream. And this was what he wanted to do. And we made the film. And that was to show other people and to give other parents hope too, because autism is hard. I can't speak to other disabilities right now, because my life was changed because of autism. And it's just, I think that it's important that we open those doors, because no one's a throwaway. Everybody's valuable. Everybody deserves it. If somebody wants to work in film, you know what? They should be able to work in film. And the only person that should be holding them back is themselves and their mindset. And I believe in breaking those boundaries and showing people who have who have been told for so long that they can't do something, that it's absolutely possible and you can do it, and to have them think outside the box and say, oh my gosh, this is something I really can do. I can actually go out and make films.
Teal, you have a lot of experience in front of the camera as an actor. I mean, what do you think your personal experience as someone who has lived in a wheelchair brings to the table that might be lost on another actor who can walk and, is playing that same type of role, as someone that's in a chair?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is disability is not just a physical characteristic. Like, it's not just I'm in a wheelchair, I just go sit in a wheelchair. It's a lived experience. It's very complex. It's nuanced. I think a lot of representation that we do see out there of disability is stereotyped and inauthentic. We talk a lot about inspiration porn, about portrayals of disability out there, or, it's about making the able-bodied people feel good and being inspiring, or you see depictions of disabled characters who, in the end, kill themselves because their lives aren't worth living. So I think it's important to not only, as Marti was saying, is she has this film, but then also cast it authentically, because you bring an authentic viewpoint to the film, not just a stereotypical view of what you think disability is.
How is it looked on in the disability community when they hire actors who are not disabled to play? Because I know as an African American, there are some roles me and my wife were talking about, like the Harriet Tubman, the lady that played Harriet Tubman was a Black British person. It wasn't even like an African American. And they're doing that a lot with roles. It's like, okay, there are only so many African American roles, and you give them to other people. Is that kind of, does the disability community feel that way at all about those roles? Like, you could have gave that job, somebody could have had a good job right there.
Yes, they do. And I will say it is starting to get better. I am starting to see when a role comes out, the casting directors and producers are like, we're gonna find a person with a disability, and they will like scour the country and even people abroad to cast authentically. But that is definitely not always the case and wasn't always the case. And I just think until this industry has to be deliberate about including actors with disability and casting them in roles that just aren't disability specific. Considering people, like in my case, I'm a wheelchair user. Why can't I audition for the teacher or the lawyer or the mother? Because those are all things that I either am or could be. And I think we need to expand that as well. But yeah, I agree with you. There is a frustration. It's like, as a person with a disability, you get so little opportunities. And so when the role with the person in the wheelchair comes along, you're like, yay, I have a chance. And then they cast somebody who's not disabled in the role. And it's just like, so frustrating.
Yeah, it's like you got to kind of give us more of those roles, or just give us more regular roles, like there are people with disabilities in every aspect of life, not just the disabled part of life. Like, life is life. Like you say, mothers, teachers, lawyers. There's people with disabilities all over. So I completely understand.
I would also go on to say that, not only is it important in front of the camera, but behind it. So I want to throw this one to Alix. So I met Alix at the wrap party for Conjuring 3, where I was attending with Marti, who also worked on that film. And but I just kind of wanted to talk to you about your experience. You had a chance to work on this like huge franchise. Can you talk to a little bit how your disability played a role in that in a different space? Because it's like looking at all of when you're talking about hundreds of people that are working on a movie as opposed to like an independent production. What is the perception there as far as like you having the ability to go do that? Do you think you changed some minds in that place?
So basically, working on Conjuring 3, I can't say it was the easiest opportunity that I had. Like walking around the studio and walking around different sets when having a walking disability was tough toward me on a daily basis, but I kept doing it, waking up and jumping at the chance and opportunities that I got. And I believe I showed people that more that we can instead of we can't, because we get a lot of they're not able to, and a lot of they can't do this or can't do that. And I believe I showed a lot of people on that franchise that we actually can. Like, I did a lot of props that you see in the movie. I worked closely with the props department, even though I was in art. I did some graphic designs that are in the movie. I hid a lot of my friends and family members' names in the movie to be funny, but that's in the movie and something I contributed to. I was always in the production office, always hanging out with the accounting team and building different connections and bonds that I still have till this day. And I just think that instead of letting people think that, hey, I'm disabled and I came for sympathy or I came to just sit around, I showed them that people with disabilities can actually do different things.
I worked with Alix on The Conjuring 3, and I can tell you that he was one of the hardest workers that we had on that set. Alix, if you asked him to do something, no matter what it was, he would get up and he would do it. He was one of the hardest workers, and that's why we became friends. And he was so smart too, because besides doing his job, he was reaching out to other people and he was reaching out to other departments, and it was making a difference. And people were started to comment, like, he's a hard worker, and things like that. And that makes a difference, because when later on, when they're in charge of things, they'll say, well, you know what? I had this guy named Alex who worked in my office, and he really kicked some tail, man. He was one of the hardest workers. I want to get somebody like him in, and he just opened up so many doors. And he's a trailblazer, Alex. That's what you are. You're a trailblazer.
I appreciate it. I enjoy working with you and everybody a part of Conjuring 3.
I got a question for you, Alex. Like, having a traumatic experience that like changed your life and your youth, and changed your whole world. How do you think that has affected and informed your filmmaking career, to this point? Not like the physical part of actually physically doing stuff, but mentally. Like, did it change the stuff that you wanted to see on the screen? Like how did it affect that?
It's funny that you asked that, because at first my mentality was I was a track star. I had everything going for me. I was a fast runner. I was very cocky and arrogant. But after the accident, I went through emotions of sadness. At first, my goal wasn't to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a veterinarian, to be honest. And I was great in math and science. And when I got to college, my film screenwriting professor, she was like, you could take apart any movie that you see and like dissect it. I realized that I wanted to be a screenwriter. So with the last years of Able Burnett, I wrote my story in a short film form. And then it grew into becoming Able Burnett, which is the feature films of that short film that I finished and have a lot of people reading it and looking at it. And I would say that my mindset grew to more positivity and happiness. And I grew a newfound respect for people with disabilities versus people that have everything just laid out for them on a silver platter.
Let me jump a little bit further down the road. So I want to go back to Marti and talking about your movie Wonder Boy. So I know it's important for you to feature an autistic person authentically, but also in a heroic way. Can you talk a little bit about how that project came together?
Sure. So Elijah Haney, who is Wonder Boy, is my son. And he went through some traumatic life events. And when he was 12, he created Wonder Boy, and he created a cartoon character. And he would make comic books with Wonder Boy because he was having problems as a person who's very logical and sees in black and white why we live in a very gray world and how people can sort of, mesh things over. He didn't understand that. So Wonder Boy was created so he could create this character who is absolutely good and evil always gets caught. There is always justice, and that was his thing. So a few years later, he wanted to do a movie about it. And I had just come off of a TV series and I was just tired. And I called a school because they had a media center and they would do movies. And I said, could you guys do this with him? He's got a script. I helped him write it. And they said, sure. And then the subsidized testing got moved to the very last week of school. And they said, we can't do it. You're not going to get to do the movie. So he comes home bawling his eyes out because autism you just can't tell autism no. You have to present another, a solution, at least offer a solution. And he was just absolutely bawling his eyes out, and I just not going to have that. So I said, lucky for you, Mama knows how to make films. And so then it was just off to the races. And so we made this film, and he wanted it to be a 1960s tribute to Batman, to Adam West. And he wanted it to have Marvel special effects. So we did all of that, knowing the way, and he wanted to, of course, play Wonder Boy because he is Wonder Boy. And he wanted, knowing his delivery, I asked him if we could get like real for real actors, to do SAG actors. So we got those around him. So everybody else was like really, really campy and over the top, and he was still the Adam West type character. And then from there, it just blossomed. Like it took 4 months to film because he was in school, but it was something, he was so proud of it. They showed it at his graduation because he made it when he was 16, and it took 2 years with all the special effects to build. And it's still to this day, it's still traveling festivals right now. That's the poster. It's still traveling festivals. It won like second place in China, like of all places. It won things in Greece and Italy. And every single time it wins something, it's just another way for me to stand up to say inclusion is possible. This is what this is. This is why this was beautiful to do. This is what you could be doing. You could be, instead of taking the fun and the magic out of making a film, you could be giving someone a creative life experience, giving everybody around them a wonderful opportunity to be able to see this person work and experience this magic and go forth with something beautiful in their heart. And with the memory of that, like, I can offer jobs, and that's pretty much what it was about. But it started off out of just sheer love for my little boy.
I think that's amazing. Just an amazing story. And Marti and I are old friends at this point, so I've heard her tell it, a couple of times. But she also was a winner at the NECAT Film Festival, which we had last year. And I mentioned earlier her being, a person who went through the NECAT program early in her career and has gone on to great heights and all that stuff. Amy talked a little bit about how she had been also involved in that same experience with Able Youth. And I wanted to go back to Amy on this one, and you talked about this a little bit already, but just having that opportunity, opening the doors to a TV studio and kind of showing not only yourself, but all the people that you work with through Able Youth, the opportunity that's there. How do you think that changed people's perception of like what they could do in the entertainment industry? And how many people are coming to you in that organization looking for just to start in the entertainment industry?
It's been a great experience for our kids. I think before that, I don't think really any of our kids had thought much about what they could do in the entertainment industry and the media industry. And I think just having those doors open literally opened their minds to what was possible. And they got to try all the roles. They got to see if they liked in front of the camera or behind the camera or in the technical room. They got to do all kinds of different things. And I think it just really opened their eyes to, hey, this is possible. The other thing I think that it really did for them is sometimes when you have a disability, you really have to think about, what a feasible career for me is going to be. And so something that I think media does for our kids and people with disabilities is, let's say you grew up or you see your friends all deciding they want to be NFL quarterbacks, and you think, well, that option might not be available to me. But with media, you can go into any career field, any genre. There's really nothing you can't do when you have media and you are familiar with how to do film and TV. You can do anything with that. And so that really opens the doors for them in their careers to know that, okay, well, maybe being a quarterback wouldn't be feasible for me physically, but that doesn't mean that I can't be a part of sports or anything as a career. And so I think that really helped them figure out that, the sky's the limit and what they can be involved in.
That's real. That's so real.
When my students, all of which are wheelchair users, started to be producers and work to be producers at NECAT, we really sat down and started thinking about and brainstorming ways that maybe things would need to be modified. And when they got on set, there wasn't one thing that needed to be modified, because all of our students, that's what people with disabilities do every day, is problem solve ways that work best for them. And so when it came time for them to be on set, it was a no-brainer. They just figured out what worked for them, and there wasn't really anything at all that had to be done different. And so I think that people sometimes think that a lot of modifications will need to be made, but really, it's like just like having somebody else on set, anybody else.
Kind of like what Marti said, I could see it almost being like better, because when you have something that people would say holds you back, you just try harder. You got to go harder. You got to work 2 times as hard as everybody else. You got to be smarter than everybody else. So it's almost like an asset. Okay, I got a question about phrasing, right? Like names and phrasings. Like, I would love to hear from everybody on the panel. Like, how would you like to be referred to? Like, is disabled cool, or able-bodied versus able-bodied, or what's kind of proper right now? Because you used to hear terms like handicap, and it's kind of, I haven't really heard that as much outside of the tag you get for your car, and I just want to make sure like people are being talked to, and we're addressing people the way that they want to be seen and addressed. Alix, what's your thoughts on that, man?
I mean, I could do anything a normal person do. I just have speech deficiencies and walking deficiencies. So in my mind, I'm basically a normal person. Except when that handicap pass come, I use it because those parking spots do come in handy.
That's real. That's real. What about you? Who want to grab that next? Teal, what you think?
Yeah, I like disabled. I consider myself a disabled person, or a person with a disability. That's the thing right now in the disability community. Should it be perfect person first language, like person with a disability, or is it disability first, disabled person? There's very much a push in the community to get rid of the stigma behind the word disability. And like, disability is not a bad word. Being disabled is not a bad thing. Like, it is what it is. So let's say the word disability, because there was a push for a little while, like differently abled, or trying to do these little like words that, to kind of like shy away from disability. But I think it's just like, for me, I like to claim it. I'm proud to be disabled. I love being a part of the disability community. And yeah.
Amy, what's your thoughts?
So I mostly use person first. I say person with a disability. That's just, I think, how I grew up. And it's, when I really think about it, that's still kind of how I think of myself, as a person first. And that kind of just like Teal said, that there's nothing wrong with having a disability, and having a disability is just another way of being a person. And so it's another quality of being a person. And so I think that's why I gravitate towards person with a disability. And I do think that what you identify with tends to be a really personal thing. And I think that even though there is an overall feeling that we should shy away from some of the terms like differently abled and things, I mean, I know people that use those as well. And so but definitely I think that having a disability, there's nothing wrong with it, and that using the word disability and disabled, like it's just part of me. And so I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with that word.
Alix said normal person. Like, normal people are so not normal. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is a normal person? It's kind of weird, but I guess I understand it. I guess that's the able-bodiedness makes you normal, but there's a lot of quote unquote normal people whose minds are like so not normal, and they are pretty whack as human beings, and I don't know. It's weird that your ability to do things determines so much,
And in talking about able-bodied, like, my body is able. It's just that works in a different way. And so, I think when we think about words, it's a complicated issue because, I do use the word able-bodied to describe other people, but I mean, my body's able too. It just works in a different way. So it's definitely something that's a complicated issue for sure.
Yeah, your body is beyond able. If you rock climbing, I can't climb no rocks,
I've seen her climb and it is frighteningly good. Like I was like, oh my God, there's no way I could ever do what she does.
Oh my goodness.
I know for me, it's like whenever we were starting to put this whole program together, Amy was kind of the first person I called. And this was kind of one of the questions that I reached out to her about, because it was like, it's like I have, multiple friends and, that are disabled and, family members that are whatnot. But it is one of those things where, like, with ever changing language, and we've seen that so much in race and sexuality, it's like we want to make sure that we're always covering those bases when it comes to people with disabilities. And I was like, I don't know. And it's like, and I need someone to ask, but I also don't want to be the person that's like making anyone like my token friend who I can like run to with any kind of, because it's like, that's not how you want to spend your day answering questions simply about like, what it's like to be in chair, because like you've got other human emotions and experiences and things like that. So I appreciate you like taking the time to do that. But let me ask you this, when it comes to that, like, what is the appropriate way to approach someone whenever like if me, a person who can walk, if I've got a question about like how you want to be talked to, or if I've got a question about what your situation is, what's the appropriate way to ask that question? That way I'm not like bombarding you or making you feel uncomfortable.
In terms of language, I think listening is important. So if you ask a question and you use the people with disabilities, and the person responds using a total different verbiage, then you can listen to that and then match that verbiage as in your follow-up. So I think that's one thing to do. And I think that a lot of people are open to talking about their disability, but not always, maybe, or maybe, no one wants to talk about, having a bad day and doesn't want to talk about, you might not get the response that you want. And so I think just honoring that not everybody necessarily wants to talk about it, all the time, I think is good. But I mean, I definitely think that also that if I'm not the one to help somebody learn what it's like to have a disability, then, who's going to teach them? Because like we said, that perspective is not available on media. And so if I'm the person that they're coming in contact with, then maybe that's all they're going to know. And so, I do try to respond in a way that helps them learn. But for sure, I think just respecting that somebody might not want to answer, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it's interesting because being an actor in the film industry, you do sometimes often have to talk about it and be an advocate for yourself, because I find myself sometimes, like if I book a commercial, maybe the crew and the director and the producer, there's a good chance they haven't worked with somebody with a disability before, and they're curious, like, what do you need as far as like accommodations for your dressing room? What would you do in this situation, in the commercial? The commercial, I remember I filmed a Liberty Mutual commercial. It was a voting commercial, and they wanted to show that there was this barrier, and they were like, well, how would you get around this barrier? You'll probably just go around it, right? And I said, no, I'd actually duck down in my wheelchair and just roll under it. And they were like, oh, that's cool. But I find that I have to be willing and open to kind of, share what I need and talk about my disability, because the filmmaking business is very collaborative, and they want my input, and I find that my input helps them, and we can have it makes the process a lot smoother. But it is hard because sometimes I just want to be an actor, and I don't want to have to be the advocate in the room saying, this isn't a good way to represent this is not a good, so there is kind of like a balance to that.
But you're kind of thrown into being like all of y'all, if you're kind of thrown into being like the ambassador, if you're the only one in the room, I guess it's kind of similar to being Black in a way, if you're the only one there, people gonna ask questions. I want to touch your hair or something, and oh, what's going on? And it might get a little weird, but that's kind of the plight you got as being pioneer in the population, you know? It's interesting. I got another question. What's something that you think people wonder about, but are always too embarrassed to ask, but you know they want to ask it and they never say it, and you're just like, come on, go ahead and say it. Go say it. I know you want to say it. What is something like that? That go anybody can answer that.
Can I start it?
Yes.
So the question I get a lot that I know a lot of people I'm around are thinking it. I just have a feeling that they're thinking it. And it's, was I born this way, or was I born like this? And I'm like, no, I got hit by a SUV, but I'm fine the way I am right now. Nothing's wrong with me. But that's pretty much the one question I get a lot.
Because of Elijah and being on the spectrum, we would go places like, say, when he was younger, to the grocery store, and he could watch a movie one time and know every single line from it, recall it from memory, and also the musical score for it. So we would be, looking at bananas in the produce section, and he's humming this musical score, and he stems, right, sometimes. So he'll do his little like thing, and he calls it zooming. That's his zooming. And he was doing that one day, and some lady was looking at him, and I knew she wanted to ask what's wrong with him, right? And Elijah kind of looked, and she saw him looking at her, and he sort of like turned to me like, why is she looking at me like that, right? And so I just looked at her and I said, look, I'm sorry your kid can't save the galaxies in the produce section and score it to music at the same time, but my kid's freaking awesome. And that was it. And I just walked away, and it was never, that's just how it always was. We never put any type of, barriers around it. He's got a big brother, he's got a big sister. And it's always, we celebrate who he is for him, and if he wants to do something, why not? That's the question. That's the question I've taught all the kids. How come you can't do that? Who says that? Well, they said, I can't do the movie. Who told you that? You can still make a movie, I said, if you want to be an astronaut, you can be an astronaut. It's just going to might be a little bit tougher, but you can do it, and so that's what I also told him to do, is to question it. And I think that there's a time to understand, obviously, things like safety and things like that, but there's also a time to push.
I think because there is so little representation of disability and authentic representation of disability, I often get people shocked about like the fact I can drive a car, that I'm married, that I had a child. When I used to live in LA, I got stopped by a couple just strangers, males, that would ask me point blank, hey, can you have sex? And just stuff like that. Like, it's just lots of misconceptions, and it's because we don't see it represented.
That's what I was going to say too. I think it runs the gamut of like really simple everyday life questions that I think people just have no idea, what I can do. And I do definitely think that it comes from so little representation that people just have never seen it. They've never seen it in real life, and they've never seen it in the media. And so they just don't know that, I can do, everything that they can do.
You said it in the beginning, Amy. It was like the media kind of does everything. So if you see it in the media, it makes more sense to you in regular life. It's like, it's actually a must that we have representation of everybody, because that's what regular life looks like,
Right. And I think, in my age, I shouldn't get so excited when I see one person with a disability on TV, and it's like, oh, look, that's someone looks like me. But it's like, something I see a couple of times a year, and it's really exciting. It shouldn't be that way, And so I hope that eventually we get to a situation where I don't have to think that, because it is normal.
I would jump in, and I would like to ask this question, because we've got with our panelists kind of a pretty good mix of representation here. But I guess let me ask it this way: how do you think we could be doing better about talking about individual disabilities? And what I mean by that is, obviously someone who's autistic is different than someone who's in a chair. And then whenever it comes to people in a chair, you've got this, situation where like you got some people who are born with a condition, and you got some people who come through it through like a traumatic accident. So we kind of put this blanket label of disabled on it, and I'm coming from an able-bodied perspective. You know what I mean? Like, how do you guys see it as individuals? Like in your own walk of life, like how is that how's that stuff bound together? Because you're all looking out for each other. Obviously, you're covered under a lot of the same laws and programs and things like that. But also, like, how are you working with people that may have a similar situation, as yourself, to both encourage them and to, like, let people know this is what it is and this is what we can do?
I think it's important what you said. Everybody that has a disability doesn't exactly have the same experience. There's intersectionality in disability. There's people with disabilities who, have different income levels, different races, different circumstances. So I think it's just approaching, each person that you come in contact with as a person and as a human, and realizing, Amy said it too, it's like taking cues from that person as far as like what they maybe identify as and what they need. And yeah.
I think when you meet one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And I think that's important to remember. But I also think, if for people that don't have a disability, I think society's not used to asking them, what do you like? How do you want to be identified as? And so, I think that there's also a situation of less care and less interest in finding out the individual preferences of somebody who doesn't have a disability. And so I think if we did that for everybody, then, it wouldn't seem so different.
Alix, you got a thought on that?
Repeat the question, because I got lost in like.
Sure. I was just saying, I mean, like, the idea of like being labeled with that term disability, which we've all kind of talked about tonight, that's an okay term to use. But like, your situation is different than Amy's situation, is different than like Marti's son's situation. How does it feel to kind of have that blanket term, and like what can we be doing better to kind of to separate that and to individualize each person?
I would say more people could like ask questions. Like, I don't mind answering questions about me or my disability. We all have a story to be told. We all have different things we go through. Normal people that are quote unquote normal and don't have a disability could be going through depression or sadness, amnesia. I mean, you can't just like pinpoint us to like one circle when pretty much everyone in the world is flawed in their own way.
And Marti, we'll leave it with you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a spectrum. I mean, autism is on a spectrum, but also disability is on a spectrum, and it is never going to be an all-encompassing thing. But I think it's just going to start with, like Alix said, with questions. And, it's not even what happened, you know what I'm saying? Like, some people will do, they will, I think it should be like, hey, what's your favorite book? Or, do you like macaroni and cheese? That was one of the things that my son would ask. Do you like macaroni and cheese? Well, who doesn't like macaroni and cheese? Well, and then all of a sudden this starts this conversation. And then they're like, oh, he's an okay kid. It's just little things like that. Or speaking with parents who don't understand that I have a kid who paces and walks in circles, and he thinks that there's something mentally wrong with him. And I'm like, no, he's just acting out a scene from a movie, and he gets excited. And so he walks off that energy. That's all that is. He's perfectly fine. But why do you feel scared by that? Let's talk about that. Let's get curious about why you feel so uncomfortable with with this particular question? Is it because you're scared that this is going to hurt my feelings or his feelings for asking questions? Because the only way you're going to find that out is if you ask the question, so I think it's, we're ingrained to be overly polite, so we don't want to ask questions, but then of course you have that curiosity, for people. But I think it's just one of these, you just, be nice to people, and that's all you really have to do is just be nice. And once you be nice, you will understand how that person ticks, because it'll open a door to them.
Well, so we're getting pretty close to wrapping up here. So I want to ask a quick question real quick, because we talked a little bit about representation and how important it is to have it on the screen. Can each one of you give me a person who you're seeing out there that is representing people with disabilities on screen or behind the scenes? What's something that you're seeing or someone you're looking up to or towards right now for, just, I don't want to say for guidance, but like just more was like, hey, that's cool that person's doing that. And anyone can jump in on that.
That the fact that in Breaking Bad, the son had special needs, and that they cast a kid with special needs for that. So I thought that was always a cool thing. That gave me a lot of respect for the producers. It gave me a lot of respect for the agencies, the production companies, and the network, because they all had to sign off on that. Whenever you work in the industry, they have to sign off and do all of these physicals and everything like that. So I know the hoops that he had to jump through to get to that spot. So in the fact that they just didn't replace him and hire somebody that was normal, to play the kid walking with crutches, that was really cool. So I really think that was an amazing thing.
Catherine Beatty, she's a wheelchair user. She has CP. She's a writer on NCIS New Orleans. And I think what we've touched on some is just, the importance of disability representation behind the scenes and having that authentic voice in the writer's room. One of the series regulars on NCIS New Orleans is Daryl Chill Mitchell, who's a wheelchair user. So I think it's so cool that there's also a writer in the writer's room. And she wrote a really cool episode last season where she brought in a bunch of actors with disabilities. And so I think just having somebody like that behind the scenes and who's just opening up this huge, NCIS franchise's mind to representation and to have her, out there writing those stories is very important.
I also want to throw out there too that I really have to give a shout out to Ryan Murphy too, because like for American Horror Story, he continually casts a girl and she's got Down syndrome. I wish I knew her name, but she's great. She's absolutely great. And they did the exact same thing with Glee. They had a girl in there that had Down syndrome. Why not? There's people in Downs, with Downs in our kids' communities and everything. And it made it more real. It made it more believable, actually, than it was, every single world that we went to with an American Horror Story, or even with Glee. It made it more believable because there's kids like that out there, it's just like, it's life. It's life. And yes, we want to be taken out of our day and just go into these fantasy worlds and just forget about it for a little bit to give ourselves a stress break and everything. But we still want to be able to emotionally attach to things. And I think by making content where you can have people who are real and them assume those roles is going to be it's just the way to go. I just things like The Good Doctor, where it's the guy, he's playing a doctor on the autism spectrum and he's not autistic. He doesn't have this, and I was just like, I can't even with this show, because it's disingenuous. It's very disingenuous. And then, you see movies like, there was a Predator movie and the little kid had autism. And at the beginning, he had sensory overloads, and all of a sudden by the end, he's fine. And they're having these bombshells go off. There's no freaking way. So be real about it, and have people just hire them. They deserve it. That's my whole thing. Sorry, I got on a soapbox. I get a little feisty.
Preach, sister, preach.
I love it. So we are running short of time here. So I'm gonna ask one last, if you give me a quick answer to this, but if tonight, it's like, I do feel like there are people at home that are watching that are learning a lot, both able-bodied people that are learning for the first time, some of, what your experience is, but I think there's also people that are watching this at home that are, that have a disability, and they are, trying to figure out what they're trying to do with their life. If you could give them one piece of advice, if they wanted to get into the entertainment industry, where would you point them towards, and what would you ask them to do? And Amy, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think if you live here in Nashville, NECAT is a great place. I can personally say that it's worked out great for me and for my students, and that it's accessible and welcoming and inclusive. And so if you're in Nashville, I think especially on the behind the scenes, but really in front of the camera too, NECAT is a great place to learn.
And let's go over to Alix.
The one thing to take is to never give up. Never tell anybody that you can't do it. Go out for it. Have your dreams, inspirations. There's only one of you, and if you never try, then you will never succeed. So try your hardest. Go out and try.
It's awesome. And Teal?
Yes, I would say really utilize the disability community, and because this industry can be difficult for anybody, whether you're disabled or not, but really use the resources, the disability community, have that support group and network of people, because sometimes things are not going to go your way or not be great. And so to have that support system and that encouragement to keep going, and that resource, because so much of the industry is collaboration and working with people. And so to really build up, that network is so important.
Great. And Marti, we'll end with you on that.
Oh my gosh. Usually I say like Alix already covered it, don't give up at all. The answer is always no until you try. That's what I keep telling my kids. So, and even if you get a no, it doesn't have to be the no that you accept. So just keep knocking on those doors. NECAT is wonderful. It opened up my eyes to a lot of things. And it was a springboard for me. And look, I'm in Atlanta working on a Netflix show right now. Anything's possible, and it got me to The Conjuring 3, where I met Alix, and Alix absolutely inspired me, and we've been friends ever since. We even play Pokemon together. So just never give up. Like Teal said too, find the resources. NECAT is wonderful. Find your tribe, pretty much, people who are going to be there for you and support you. If someone says you can't do something, that's just toxic, just stick to your guns, stick to your dreams and chase them down. And you are going to open so many doors, and you're going to be that way maker for other people, do it for other people, if not for yourself, and be kind. I'm always about being kind.
I really appreciate all of y'all and the perspective, and that's so cool. I think that something like this is really good because it helps that conversation. Somebody could watch this and have a good starting point, So I just really appreciate being able to be a part of this conversation. I appreciate NECAT. Cam, thank you for asking me to do this, man. Like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't have known. And Amy, Teal, Alix, Marti, it's just such an honor to meet y'all and, make some new friends. And Cam, you're the guy with the smooth beard and hair. Take it away.
All right. That's about all the time we have here. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. Once again, I want to thank my co-host, Big Fella, as well as all four of our panelists for joining and offering their expertise and insight. I also want to thank the Dugas Family Foundation for helping to underwrite this program. We Foster Film is named in loving memory of Foster Dugas, who loved movies, monster makeup, Halloween, and all things creative. We are thankful for the impact that he had on NECAT and his ongoing legacy of creative and technical educational programming. To learn more about We Foster Film and NECAT, please visit us on the web at necatnetwork.org. We want to thank you all for watching at home, and I hope you all join us back next time on We Foster Film. Good night.
Thank you for watching We Foster Film, named in loving memory of Foster Dugas, who loved movies, monster makeup, Halloween, and all things creative. We Foster Film is made possible by funding provided by the Dugas Family Foundation, supporting visual arts education in Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, and viewers like you. Thank you. To find out how you can support locally made television or to start your own film and television career, visit us on the web at necatnetwork.org.